What I really wanted to talk to you today about is the crucial importance of the validation in a test bed. The reason being is there's still a lot of ADAS development going on out in the industry, and a lot of people you see in the news articles that these level 4 trucks and these robo taxis being out in the real world and in the real environment. And sometimes I know the media doesn't help, but at the same time, it's one of those things where it can kind of scare people off. And with some of these issues that have occurred, and how is it truly safe to ride in one of those, and how do you go about those, the safety aspect of it. And where AVL comes into play is we all actually love to offer and talk with other customers and collaborate with them in how you can do this safely, right? That means not only are you taking this from a software, model and loop kind of perspective, and you are moving towards a actual validation in a test bed with an actual vehicle, and you can push the limits and boundaries instead of doing that on the real road. And that also entails starting with the engineering background, right? Engineering efforts of developing this entire matrix of the safety functionality, and the customer may or may not have their operational design domain already put out. So how does that play with the safety functionality? How does that all fit in together? And what criteria do I really have to test to make sure I give the consumers, our clientele, or for our client, the consumers and the end users to feel safe about operating or being in one of these vehicles. And way that you can really go into about this is step by step. Like I said, starting with the model and loop, so that you're developing your limitations, and you can really work around how you can get the boundaries of your operational design domain. That also means you are finding out either sensors or perception algorithm has its limitation, and then you're starting to do some basic development, and you're working through the development and improvement of those, right? And what happens after is people like to do the actual hill, which is hardware and loop, which in the end, it's great that you can test out all these radar sensors, lidar, the camera, everything individually. But the question is, how does that all work together and fit together as an entire system? And that's where we come in with some, we call on driving cube, but it is essentially a vehicle in loop. What that means, you could do one of two ways. You can either test out your, perception stack. You can be validating your sensors. And that means you're either injecting, to the actual ECU of the objects that you want the vehicles to think it's seeing, so you can test out how the vehicle behaves in a certain scenario. Or you can also do certain stimulants, and this will help run through so many different scenarios from a safety perspective. For example, you are talking about a lady crossing the road out of nowhere, and you can go through so many different scenarios with that, one specific item. And we call that, generating test cases. It's with certain scenarios, it's a combination of it. You have a lady walking across, but the question is the visibility, time of the day, going to play into a factor for the sensors? Or is it going to be one of those, you have just a single lady walking by without other vehicles, no blind spots or anything like that? So how do you generate all of this, and how do you go about testing this to make the consumers feel safe? That's why we have all of these specific scenarios, and you can test and generate a bunch of different test cases with the varying combinations of these scenarios. And then that way people can take that into either maybe a chassis dyno or a powertrain test bed. There's obviously pros and cons with each type of setup. You can, with the powertrain test bed, you can be a little bit more you can push the test limits and you can have more dynamic testing compared to chassis dyno, but chassis dyno does allow you to do a lot more certification type of testing, and it's an easy, you pull in, you strap everything down, and you're able to continue with the testing. So there's a couple different areas that you can do this with a vehicle on loop, but in the end is you're able to do this safely in a test cell environment. You're not putting anybody, and I mean anybody as in the driver or the pedestrian or other vehicles, other people in any harm's way. And to make the end user in the end feel more comfortable about this, you're able to do a repeatable testing. And in a scientific community, that's crucial, right? Repeatability and validating your results. So if we're able to support these, ADAS development OEMs or, these robotaxi companies to support that and say, hey, we can support you guys in the validity and the repeatability of your testing, that's going to be huge going in the next step, because right now the regulation still lacks a little bit and people are still trying to figure out, okay, what is a safe criteria? When does a driver have to take ownership of it versus when can the vehicle still operate and do all of that on its own? So there's still a lot of question, and being able to test everything out and being able to offer that really goes a long way and provides the comfort that we have not had up to now. The reason why I think automated driving will be safe in the future is as long as we have enough repeatable data to support the algorithm and the AI, basically, artificial intelligence that's going into the vehicle, I'd be comfortable with it as well. And it will provide for a very safe environment. Mm-hmm. But it also comes with, right now, SAE is about the only really categorization from level 0 to 5. And it's great that we have this categorization from level 0 to 5, but we have certain, if we have a level 4 driving capability out in Arizona or in the West Coast somewhere where it's mostly sunny, no, hardly any rain, no snow, how does that impact the rest of the nation? Like, is it still considered level 4 out in Michigan in the winter times? And that has to be defined in order for people to really really be able to test the limitation of the vehicles. That's gonna be the truth and reality of it. We can have all these, quote unquote level 4s, but if we can't operate in certain states or, it's not gonna be very valuable and people are gonna be very reluctant to drive, and we have to go through all of those test cases and consider the variations that we have. Even if it's not just overseas, a global level, but at least even if it's the United States, we have to consider everything. And that's why vehicle on loop with all these different environmental factors is going to be a key thing in doing all of that validation.